Now, The Hunt Palmer Show.
Boy, does it smell good.
You're listening to The Hunt Palmer Show, brought to you by Rouse's Supermarkets on 104.5 ESPN, Baton Rouge.
That's good.
Live from the Mercedes-Benz of Baton Rouge studio, this is Hunt Palmer.
Hunt Palmer coming to you from the Mercedes-Benz of Baton Rouge studio downtown in the capital city on this Thursday. It means we're brought to you by Rouse's Markets, official supermarket of the New Orleans Saints. Got some Saints to talk about today. Got Jacob Beck and Cassie Pizzali back there on the ones and twos, and glad you're hanging out with us on 104.5 ESPN Baton Rouge. Plenty of guests to get to here on this Thursday. As always, we'll talk to Luke Johnson in 15 minutes. LSU loses a defensive line coach to the Saints. Bo Davis headed to New Orleans. We'll talk to Luke about that. He reported it this morning. We'll chat with Joe Healy coming up in 30 minutes about the SEC baseball weekend to come. Chris Blair will join us as well. So lots and lots to do here on this Thursday edition of the Hunt Palmer Show. Lock us in for the next 2 hours. Start the same way we start every day, our Genesis opening drive.
It's time for Hunt's Opening Drive, presented by Genesis of Baton Rouge.
The biggest story today, obviously, is Bo Davis, but I don't want to start there because we're going to talk about it with Luke coming up in 15 minutes. So let's talk LSU baseball. Last night, Tigers get a top 25 midweek win. Those are pretty rare. They did so in a big league ballpark. That is also pretty rare. LSU beats Dallas Baptist 7-3 last night at Globe Life Field in Arlington. And honestly, it was a domination, an absolute domination, really from start to finish. Curiel gets on to lead off the game. Jones drives him in, and LSU never truly looked back in this game. However, it was not without some drama because Dallas Baptist in the 8th loads the bases with 1 out, down 4, and hits an absolute rocket right at Jared Jones for a double play. Some good baseball fortune there for LSU. That came on the heels of LSU failing to put the game completely out of reach. You've got a spot in the 7th with the bases loaded and 1 out. You go with the suicide squeeze with Josh Pearson. He pops it up. Essentially, you leave him loaded even though it only counts as straining 2. And then the next inning, you load the bases with nobody out, and you're unable to come through with a hit. McPaul strikes out. Ryan Costello pops out to first. Chris Stanfield strikes out, and you leave the bases loaded. It was a theme of the night last night and the reason why there was some drama. LSU out-hit Dallas Baptist 12-3 in the game. Crushed them in terms of hitting. But the Tigers were just 3 for 16 in the game with runners in scoring position. Now, LSU is going to strand some runners on base. They're going to strand some runners in scoring position because they get on base a lot. I know that drives most of you nuts, and that's not going to change anytime soon, and I'm not excusing last night at all. I'm telling you that they're going to leave some guys on base. You can leave some guys on base. You score 7, 8, 9 runs. You're just getting a lot of guys on base. But they're not doing enough. I mean, in this game, LSU had 26 at-bats with runners on base. Dallas Baptist had 6 at-bats with runners on base. DBU left 3 men on base in the game. LSU, of course, left a lot more than that on base. They left 15 on. But if you take away, or look beyond, I shouldn't say take away, look beyond the fact that LSU didn't score as many runs as they should have, and you just look at the totality of the game, LSU dominated Dallas Baptist. I thought it started with Connor Ware, who got LSU off to a great start. He threw 4 perfect innings. I thought his fastball command was good. I thought he threw the breaking ball exceptionally well, landed it for a really nice called third strike to a right-handed hitter. I thought he featured the changeup a little bit. He was in complete control, and that's what you would consider LSU's 4th or 5th starter right now. And he was awesome in the game. I think he'll be much more impactful on this team than a 4th or 5th starter, but he gives it the home run to lead off the 5th, and Jay Johnson says, okay, let's go get him. And Zach Cowan comes in, and he does get into a little bit of trouble, and he gives up the big home run, a 2-run shot. But outside of that pitch, he was not bad. He struck out 5 in 3 innings of work, only walked 1. I thought he did a good job. Cooper Williams didn't have it, came in and walked the 2 guys that he faced. That's a guy that's going to learn from that. He's a Texas native. He's in Globe Life, big lights, first time, and he didn't have it. But Kason Evans came in and very much did have it. He came in and blew him away as he has done. He faced 5 guys. He struck 2 of them out. Faced 5 hitters, struck 2 of them out, got a ground ball that he needed in the 8th inning. So really good stuff from Kason Evans. Really good stuff from the pitching staff from Ware, Cowan, and Evans. And then LSU offensively kind of showed their depth, but did they show it to a fault? Because it is great that you can go to the bench early in the game and have Ethan Fry come out and hit an RBI double in a pinch hitting spot in the 5th inning. It's great that you can go to John Pearson against a lefty and have him smoke one up the middle in the 4-run 5th inning. So those 2 guys come off the bench in a spot that you've designated for them and contribute. And that's awesome. That's great depth. But when you do that, you start to put some of your starters on the bench and you're pinch running, and then all of a sudden you end up in a spot where Mick Paul and Ryan Costello are taking big at-bats in the 8th inning. That's not my favorite thing. I love the depth piece of it. But if you're going to burn Jake Brown and Ashton Larson halfway through the game, like, you got big at-bats coming, and you got guys up there that aren't your key contributors. Maybe that's a plan that Jay Johnson's got for the duration of the season. Maybe he just wants to see it in February. I don't know. But it was a little much for me. I would prefer those pinch hit spots come later. And I get it. They came through. But I don't need Mick Paul and Ryan Costello hitting in the 8th inning with the bases loaded in a game that's still contested. And 2 of my best players are sitting on the bench because of it. So there is a lot of depth, and that's awesome. And you saw that. But did they go to it a little bit early? That's a discussion that we can have. Derek Curiel is not a discussion we need to have outside of saying he's a star. An absolute star. Last night, 2 for 3. He walked a couple times, got hit by a pitch. That's 2 hits, 2 walks, and a hit by a pitch. He was on 5 times out of the leadoff spot, scored 3 runs. I like him there. I don't mind at all going Derek Curiel and Jared Jones right at the top of the order. It's kind of the new age way to do things, right? I've talked at length in the first 3 weeks about how it's important. If you're going to have Curiel and Jones in the 2 and 3 spots, it's really important who you hit in front of them. If you move them up a spot, it's still important who's in the 9 hole, which in this case was Chris Stanfield, who had a tough night, left 7 guys on base. But if you can figure out who to hit 9th or 8th, and you want to put them at the top of the order, I don't have any problem with that. I like Derek Curiel leading the game off. I like Jared Jones coming up there in the 2nd hole. I think that's trouble for opposing teams. And last night you saw Curiel go ahead and draw the walk, and then Jones ripped it in the gap. And that didn't get Jared Jones out of his game. He still walked twice last night, still had two hits, another one up the middle and a nice piece of opposite field hitting. He's really seeing it great. His approach is great. He's at a great spot in the lineup. I think he's a star. He's a potential SEC Player of the Year in LSU's lineup. And Derek Curiel is that too at this point in his career. I think he's that good. I think his bat control is that good. I think his instincts are that good. I think his defense is that good. I think he's one of those guys you get through the draft and you were fortunate to do it. And that's been evidenced from the beginning of the season. They've played 2.5 weeks. It's been obvious the whole time how good he is. And last night, he showed that as well. Daniel Dickinson continues to hit. He got 2 hits in 5 tries, drove in 3, had the big home run down the left field line, got a breaking ball down, got the barrel to it, and hit a line drive out. But I'll say the same thing today that I said after the first weekend when he lit it up against Purdue Fort Wayne. Like, I know Daniel Dickinson can hit mid-major pitching. He did it for 2 years at Utah Valley. This is known. The question is, I don't know what he looks like on Fridays against Texas, against Mississippi State, against Tennessee. That remains to be seen. And I'm thrilled that he continues to hit the ball hard. He made a great defensive play last night, going to his left, backhand side, laid out, made the catch, strong throw to first. He's done everything right. I have no complaints with Daniel Dickinson. But I'm a prove-it guy in this sport, and I'm waiting for him to prove it in SEC play. That's not his fault. He doesn't have a chance to prove it in SEC play right now. That's not an option for him. I'm just saying, as someone who's analyzing the team, I want to watch that come March. And we're almost there, but I love to see him hitting the ball really hard a couple of times last night. And Stephen Milam had a couple more hits. Since he made the last out of LSU's lone loss of the season. He's been on a tear. 3 games, knocking it all over the place, hit the home run back on Monday, 2 more hits last night. We know he's going to hit. He's done a great job at shortstop as well. So I'm pumped about that guy in the middle of the lineup too. So really, as you look at it, LSU dominates this game. DBU had 3 errors, 3 hits, 3 runs. LSU 7 runs on 12 hits, had the 1 error. Jones couldn't catch the ball. But I like the pitching a lot, especially where, and then the back end with Evans. I loved LSU's offensive approach to get guys on base, to create traffic. You scored a run in the first. You scored 4 in the 5th. You scored 2 in the 6th. You had the bases loaded in the 7th and the 8th. That's creating enough traffic to get things done. Yes, you've got to execute better. If you're going to call the squeeze, Pearson's got to get it down. I don't care if it's Mick Paul or Ryan Costello or Jake Brown or Ashton Larson, whoever comes up with the bases loaded in the 8th inning with nobody out or 1 out needs to come through with the quality at bat, and LSU didn't do it. It was not a perfect game. But in summation, this was not some SWAC Tuesday. This is a top 25 team, a team that the last 4 years of college baseball has finished with an RPI in the top 50, a likely quad 1 game against a solid team. You didn't see their weekend arms either, and they didn't probably play their best game, but it is a solid baseball team, and LSU overwhelmed them with talent and execution. It wasn't perfect, but it was good.
It won't be considered a neutral site game?
I believe it will be.
Okay, so then it'd still be quad 1, you think?
Baseball doesn't have the...
they don't have the...
It's just top 50, top 100, top 150, and beyond. So I looked that up yesterday. I didn't know that as of 25 hours ago. I generally have to refresh some of these things. But yeah, I checked it out on the RPI stuff. Top 50 is quad 1, and DBU is very, very likely a top 50 team. So going to be likely a quad 1 game. Impossible to know at this point. Likely a quad 1 win. And when it comes to late May, my number 1 metric, and I'm not on the committee, but my number 1 metric is what'd you do in quad 1 as far as your winning percentage and how many wins you got. And the SEC gets a nod there because they play far more than teams in the ACC, Big 12, Big 10, whoever. But I think it's important, and LSU will take one of those quad 1 wins if you can get it on a Wednesday, and they certainly did last night, dominating Dallas Baptist 7-3. That's our Genesis opening drive today. Every car that's on the lot is online at genesisofbatonrouge.com. Luke Johnson did some breaking news today. Bo Davis headed from the Tigers to the Saints. We'll talk to him about it next.
The Hunt Palmer Show.
Highland Insurance Group, highlandig.com is that website. Insurance is no fun. I tell you that just about every day. I did it for 7 years, but in the course of that 7 years, I personally saw commercial insurance really help businesses in times of need. And you never know when those times are coming. You get a week's notice on a hurricane, you get no notice on a cyber breach or a car accident, lawsuit, whatever the case may be. You need your policy to respond. And if the only thing you've ever considered in an insurance renewal is the price, I would strongly suggest you take a look at a different perspective and let the Highland Insurance Group come audit your policy and see how it's going to respond in the event that there is an issue. They've got clients in every vertical market that you can think of, and they're happy to help you and place your insurance with one of the dozens of carriers they're contracted with as an independent brokerage. It's Jonathan Carbon's team right here in Baton Rouge, the Highland Insurance Group, highlandig.com.
You're listening to The Hunt Palmer Show, brought to you by Rouse's Supermarkets.
Here, Thursday edition of the Hunt Palmer Show, presented by Rouse's Markets, official supermarket of the New Orleans Saints. Speaking of the New Orleans Saints, if you're a Saints fan, you're excited today. Picked up a really quality defensive line coach in Bo Davis. If you're an LSU fan who loves the Saints, you're probably a little bit torn on that as LSU loses an elite recruiter and position coach to the Saints. If you're an LSU fan who doesn't care about the Saints, you're kind of ticked off. And if you are ticked off, you can blame our next guest, Luke Johnson, because he broke the story and he ruined your morning. So he is the guy that we've got to call to the carpet here. Luke, do you have to apologize to all the LSU fans who do not care about the Saints and are furious about this news?
No, I don't have to apologize for anything. But I am going to tell you my mentions have been absolutely hilarious this morning.
I mean, it's like, LSU fans who don't care about the Saints are really cranky.
Dude, it has been a long time since I've had this much fun, like just scrolling through like my personal interactions on Twitter, because like there are people like who are just like really just like threatening bodily harm against like, you know, Saints executives, and then there's just like the group of people who's like, man, like I'm really sad, but like, damn, this is a really good hire. You know, it's been a wild ride this morning.
Sports don't call for a lot of reason, oftentimes. When this crossed your radar, did it surprise you?
Yeah. Actually, I think my response when somebody told me about this was like, "Yo, what?" Look, I mean, they're obviously, because of how late they are in the game on this, they're in like a little bit of a unique situation putting together the staff. You know, their pool of applicants is, you know, effectively it's NFL coaches who are unemployed or college coaches, right? Because even if they're going to hire, like, let's say there was like some like guy who's like an assistant linebackers coach somewhere who they really like and think is really sharp, like that counts as a lateral move to go from that to like the full linebackers coach. So other teams can block that. So I think they've taken a really smart approach here, even if LSU fans are not agreeing with it, and that they're just like, okay, who are some of the best college coaches out there, and are they interested in coaching at the NFL level? So I mean, they've got a college DC as their linebackers coach. I think you could argue that they got the best defensive line coach in college football to be their defensive line coach, and the best defensive backs coach in college football to be their defensive backs coach. That's a pretty major coup when you're not hiring guys who, you know, were coaching at the like smart coaches who were coaching at the NFL level last year, but were like unfortunate enough to be on a staff that, you know, was let go. So, I mean, smart on their part, but, you know, really frustrating if you're an LSU fan.
I know that assistant coach salaries are not public and are hard to get to, but we do know that Bo Davis, who worked for the public university, was making $1.25 million at LSU. I would suggest that that's probably a nice little pay cut for him, but a chance that you don't have to deal with the NIL and transfer portal and yet coach at the highest level. What sort of dynamics do you think are at play here with all that?
Yeah, you know, I don't know if I would. Again, we have no idea, right? We have no idea what they're making, and yeah, that's true for even most head coaches. So I don't know if I would think he's taking a big pay cut, though. Because I mean, yes, there's a lot of stuff involved with college football right now that you know, especially for somebody who's a recruiter, it makes it kind of a difficult world to be in. But, you know, I mean, I know personally that, like, I'm not taking a pay cut to do a job somewhere else, you know, especially if it's, like, considered a level up, right, going from college to professional football. Like, I don't think that's necessarily, like, you say anything wrong there. You know, I think that's where a lot of the premier coaches go. And, yeah, I'd be surprised if he's making, like, less than $1 million to coach your defensive line. Or you know, significantly less than what he was making at LSU. That'd be really shocking to me. I think they probably compensated him very well to leave his alma mater after 1 year. You know, where he's kind of he knows he's like taking a very important spot on that staff.
Yeah, it's interesting for sure, and we'll see how LSU responds to that. But the more important pressing matter for the beat that you're covering here is the Saints. They've kind of got their coaching staff together. Is the next step here Derek Carr? Have they put that to bed with what Mickey Loomis said this week? I mean, what's kind of next for this organization?
Well, I think they're doing it right now. Yeah, they got it was important for them to get their defensive coordinator in place last week, because that's going to change the kind of players that we see on this team and on this defense. They need to know that stuff before they come out here to the combine. I mean, like, you know, they could do a lot of like the film work. They're going to know, and obviously, like, you don't need to be here to see somebody run a 40 or whatever. But like, you want to build kind of your list of who you think is going to be part of your draft class here. You know, and like you start, you know, really filling out kind of like the meat of the dossier where you're doing these meetings with these kids, and you want to know what kind of kids you're trying to add. Like, they're going to have to add some like kind of bendy edge rushers of the kind they have not looked at in forever. right? They've been running this Dennis Allen scheme for forever. And now they're running a completely different scheme that is going to require different players. They need to know, we need to know that the 240-pound outside linebackers are going to be the guys we're looking at. So I think that part was really important. I think that's really what they're drilling down on here. I was talking to somebody before, on the plane up here. It said they hadn't even put together the list of defensive free agents. These are the guys we should be looking at because they didn't have a defensive staff. So that part's going to be involved too.
Mickey Loomis said that he thought that they would be a little bit more aggressive in this offseason than they were last offseason. Now, they weren't very aggressive at all last offseason, but I was kind of under the impression that they were kind of slowing everything down. Do you get the sense that it is ramping up now with a new staff and more salary cap room than maybe they anticipated?
Yeah, weirdly, I get that sense. I don't know why. But I think that's probably why, maybe the impression is that maybe they wouldn't be doing this, right? Because I think everybody who's looking at this organization from the outside in, they're like, well, there's no way, right? There's no way that they'd take on more and they'd be aggressive in free agency because of the position they're in. They're probably going to have to do a reset, right? And it's just every time you take that logical route, what all the evidence is telling you they should and will do, you talk to them and they say, no, we're going to continue doing the thing that we do. And whether it's right or wrong, it's let's just be real. They have a way better understanding of where they're at right now than we do in terms of what's realistically feasible from a management of the salary cap and player acquisition sort of thing. But I still don't see how it's going to work. I'm really interested to figure out how, because I feel like I'm going to learn something this offseason one way or another.
Yeah, I mean, it's just it's reasonable to suggest they would change things up a little bit, but this organization hasn't changed things very rapidly in the past. Anything stand out from Kellen Moore, whether it's the staffing, something he said in press conferences, anything that has caught your eye since his hire?
I think one of the things that has stood out about Kellen Moore is there's not going to be a lot of stuff that stands out about him in a press conference setting.
Yeah.
I think he's for a first-time head coach. I think he's already kind of mastered the art of saying something while saying absolutely nothing, which is deeply, deeply unfortunate for me. But nobody cares about me. I think it's really kind of tough to get a true read of how he thinks about things and where he sees things going. But I do think that one of the interesting things is asking about Brandon Staley and the 3-4 thing and whatever. It's the change in defensive schemes is kind of yes, they are going to have to get the type of players they didn't get before, but it's not like it was in 1995 when you have to completely blow up the type of roster you had and bring in completely new guys. Because at the end of the day, you're still going to spend 70 or 80% of your time in your sub nickel dime packages, where it's a 4-2-5, or where everybody's running variations off of that. So I thought that part was interesting. It's just it's not going to require a total overhaul of their defensive personnel. They're just going to need a couple pieces they don't currently have. So I'm going to be interested to learn more about. We should hopefully talk to Brandon Staley next week and maybe get some more insight from him on that. But I did find that interesting.
Are you going to have a shrimp cocktail?
I stayed out so late on my first night that I was falling asleep in my dinner last night. I was going to go meet our mutual buddy Dave Hellman for a little shrimp cocktail plus at 10 p.m. last night, and I had to be just the world's biggest loser and text him at 8:30, be I'm going to bed, bro. I'm not making it. I'm not making it. You're gonna have to do this without me. So maybe tonight I'll just man up and reclaim whatever Marine Corps lore that's just completely gone from me now.
You gotta man up. You gotta make up for yourself. You owe that to Dave.
He's already gone though. That's the thing. Yeah, he left. I just got lunch with him. He's like on the way to the airport right now.
All right. Well, enjoy the combine.
Yeah.
We'll talk next week, man.
Yeah, thanks, buddy. We'll talk to you soon.
Luke Johnson at the Advocate by Luke Johnson on Twitter. Appreciate him giving us a little bit of time from Indianapolis, talking a little bit of Saints. Our Thursday show is brought to you by Rouse's Market. We'll come back and set the stage for the SEC weekend, kind of get caught up on where things stand in the conference through a couple of weeks. Joe Healy, D1 Baseball's SEC Extra Team, is next.
The Hunt Palmer Show.
Genesis of Baton Rouge, genesisofbatonrouge.com is the website. Every car that is on the lot is online at genesisofbatonrouge.com. When you think Genesis of Baton Rouge, think luxury. When you think luxury, don't think, I can't. That's out of my price range. It may not be. You got to check. Genesis' whole model is the luxury experience at a reasonable price, from the first line all the way up through the highest level. You're talking about sedans, you're talking about SUVs, luxury vehicles, affordable prices. Get on by and see for yourself. Go see them at Airline near Piku, check in with their brand ambassadors, and talk about what it may take to get you behind the wheel of a Genesis. I can promise you, once you get behind the wheel, you will notice the difference. It's a phenomenal product, phenomenal staff, and you may not have seen them because they've only been in that location for just over 2 years. It's Genesis of Baton Rouge. Go by and see them, Airline at Piku. Check them out online, genesisofbatonrouge.com, genesisofbatonrouge.com.
This is the Hunt Palmer Show, brought to you by Rouse's Supermarkets.
LSU baseball going to get underway from Frisco, Texas in 24 hours and 30 minutes. The 2 o'clock first pitch tomorrow between LSU and Kansas State. If you want to watch LSU all weekend long, you can, thanks to the good folks at D1 Baseball. One of those folks at D1 Baseball, part of the SEC Extra Team, is Joe Healy. He's with us every single Thursday. Joins us now on the Jim's Firearms Hotline. Joe, how are you?
Doing well, hon. Excited, as I'm sure you and your listeners are, to see LSU up against a little different level of competition this week. So certainly looking forward to that.
Yeah, very much so. Got off to a good start in their Texas swing last night against Dallas Baptist, and they'll try to do it 3 more times over the weekend up in Frisco. I want to talk about Texas A&M first today, Joe. Obviously, huge blow losing Gavin Gahovic for the year, and they just haven't quite played to the level we may have anticipated as of 3 weeks ago. What do you make of the injury and the start for the Aggies?
Yeah, the injury is obviously tough because he was probably Jay Slaviolette's best bit of lineup protection. That being said, it's still obviously a really, really good lineup. But now all of a sudden you look at Grahovic's out. We knew before the season they were going to be without Shane Sadeo, who is probably going to be their Saturday guy. And then Josh Stewart, a reliever that they really rely on, has been dinged up as well. So they've kind of had to battle it a little bit early this season. As far as the results, I would compare it a little bit to the 23 LSU team that there was so much expectation about, that every little thing got hyper-analyzed the first few weeks of the season. I think it's kind of the similar thing with A&M. I mean, maybe we'll look up in a few weeks and, the injuries or what have you have really made an impact. But I think there's also a very real scenario where maybe this team isn't quite as good as we thought it would be, but ultimately they'll be fine. And I'm betting on that, as far as at least the way they've looked, because I agree generally, kind of feels like they're sleepwalking a little bit. But in that way, I think maybe losses to Cal Poly and Texas State, honestly, maybe not the worst thing in the world, because now, if they didn't before, they now realize, hey, we're not going to be able to just show up to the ballpark every day and just beat teams because we're more talented. That's not the way it works.
Let's talk Tennessee. I know you were higher on Liam Doyle entering the season than his statistics indicated at Ole Miss last year. He's been remarkable through 2 weeks. Do you feel like he's a top 2 or 3 arm in the league right now?
100%. I mean, it's like all of the good things we saw from Ole Miss last season, because he did a lot of good things at Ole Miss, even if the numbers didn't necessarily suggest that. I mean, the fastballs has elite metrics on it, and he got a lot of whiff on it, and he actually threw a lot of strikes, even though the reputation is that he wasn't a great strike thrower. You look at strike percentage, he actually was really good, but it's also none of the negative, where, his secondary stuff has looked improved through a couple of weeks. He's not being limited necessarily to, or his pitch counts aren't quite as high as we get into the middle innings as they were at Ole Miss. So at least so far, it appears that he's kind of rid himself a lot of the negatives and kept some of the positives. And I think in the bigger picture, it's just like any arm Tennessee brings in with Frank Anderson as the pitching coach, I'm just going to believe they're going to get more out of them, because there's very little evidence that we should believe otherwise at this point.
Yeah, he's been remarkable there, developing a lot of really good arms. As far as Tennessee's offense goes, I looked at that position player group and I thought, man, no more, and Burke's gone. And they kind of, I don't know if they're ready to restock all those shelves. They're swinging it really well against some poor competition early. I ranked Tennessee as the best team in the league yesterday when I did my power rankings. Do you concur with that?
I mean, I don't know that I would, but I will say I think you can make the argument.
Yeah.
I would certainly be willing to listen to it because, yeah, I think I've been most optimistic about from a Tennessee standpoint is that, okay, they're beating up on bad pitching. I get it. However, within that, the guys who are leading the way are not necessarily Andrew Fisher and Cannon Peebles and Hunter Inslee and Dalton Bargo. Some of those guys are having good years, but the guys who are really kind of have broken out are, Levi Clark and Jay Abernathy and Reese Chapman and guys that were going to have to step in if Tennessee is going to be able to be a team that wins a national title again. We'll see what happens once they start facing better pitching week to week. That starts this weekend in the tournament in Houston. But right now, at least, I'll take it as a big positive that it's not just the old guard leading the way and dragging everyone else along. These young players, and in the case of Chapman, a breakout player, are kind of taking the bull by the horns right now, and I think that's great news for the Vols.
Florida, we'll learn more about them coming up this weekend as they take on a quality Miami team, but what's your early read on Sully's crew?
I think the biggest thing for them is if Brody Donay is going to be this Brody Donay, then they're really cooking. Because, again, we talked about Liam Doyle in a similar way. Like, Donay we knew what there was to like about him, right? Like, he can hit the ball 600 feet at any given moment, but he struck out a ton and, didn't really seem to have a lot of approach at the plate. And this year he's taken more walks. He's still swinging and missing a little bit, but not nearly like he did before. And he looks like a guy who, honestly, if he keeps this up, which he won't, let's be honest, he's not going to hit 450. But if he does something like this the rest of the way, he's maybe an SEC Player of the Year type of guy. He certainly has the talent for it. We've just been kind of waiting on it to come along. So that's the biggest piece of optimism I have there. And then the rotation transitions have gone pretty well. I'm talking about Jake Clemente, who was a reliever last year. So far, so good for him. Pierce Coppola appears to have picked up where he left off rather than taking a step back, given that this is the first year where from day one they're going to be saying, hey, we need you to go out there every weekend and start for us. So, again, you're right that we'll learn a little bit more against Miami this weekend, but I've nothing but positive things to say about what Florida's done so far.
We know Arkansas is going to pitch it, and they're pitching it really well. They just haven't hit as consistently as I think a lot of Hog fans may want them to. What do you think about the Arkansas offense to this point, and is it good enough for them to make a push?
Yeah, I think it's better, but I think it's more moderately better than it is exponentially better, which is I think what a lot of Hog fans were hoping for. And I said it on various podcasts and shows I did last weekend, where it's just like, this is also like Arkansas fans just have to come to terms with the fact that this is the way this team is built. Like, yes, you'd rather win a game 5-1 than 2-1, but they have the arms to win games 2-1, and you might just have to come to terms with the fact that that's kind of how this team is going to win games. And last year it kind of blew up in their faces in a regional when they just couldn't hit enough. When Kansas State in that regional, hit Hagen Smith for the first time all season, they didn't have the offense to punch back. I think this year they'll be able to do that a little bit more, but to me that just means they're going to kind of be a middle of the pack lineup as opposed to a bottom portion of the SEC lineup. And with their pitching, I think that's good enough to get them to Omaha. Now, but I think it's also true that we've learned in this version of college baseball, as much as we love to go nuts about the quality of pitching, you've got to be able to mash when it comes to May and June when it's really hot outside and the ball is flying. If you can't put up 12 runs on any given day, you're probably not going to win a national title. So that's going to be something to watch as Arkansas moves forward.
We're chatting with Joe Healy. He and Mark Etheridge team up for the SEC Extra section on D1 Baseball. Always awesome stuff there on the website, as well as the Highway to Hoover podcast, which you can listen to a couple times a week wherever you find your podcasts. Let's talk a little LSU. Joe, I know that the Tigers haven't faced anybody outside of DBU with much of a pulse, but do you have a read on the Tigers early on? Anything that's caught your eye?
Yeah, on the pitching side, I think I'm really excited. I mean, obviously, Ianson and Shores and Anderson have been as expected, but I'm intrigued by the group of young pitchers and how that'll hold up. Kason Evans, William Schmidt, Maverick Rizzi, those guys that we knew had stuff, but how ready are they going to be from day one to be contributors? So far, so good on that regard. So I'm really excited to see this, whether it's this weekend or as we get into SEC play. how well do they hold up? Because that's obviously a different deal. But if you're telling me that even if they're just like bullpen pieces, if you're telling me those guys, by the time we get to May, they're still going to be guys that we lean on pretty heavily, then I'm extremely bullish on what LSU has on the mound. Because I was bullish coming into the season in the rotation. That's been good. Now, if you tell me the young guys are coming along, or Connor Ware last night is a JUCO guy, like he was excellent against a good DBU lineup. If you tell me those things continue, I'm really bullish there. On offense, the biggest thing for me is Derek Curiel going to end up being, like some of these guys at LSU we've seen in recent years, like Dylan Cruz, for example, where from day one, he was arguably the best player on the field until the last game he played at LSU. He was arguably the best player on the field. Can he be, whether or not he's the best hitter on this LSU team, we'll see. But I just mean in terms of being a dude from day one until he leaves campus, I think he's got a shot to be that kind of guy. And nothing we've seen through the first 2 weeks has changed my mind on that.
Yeah, it kind of looks like that from my two eyes. He's just been sensational since he got here in the fall. He's just hit and hit and hit, and he hadn't slowed down. He was great in the game last night. Can you tell us anything about Kansas State that LSU will see tomorrow? I do know that they lost a lot from that really talented position group that they had last year.
Yeah, they have lost a lot. I think that the thing that could potentially give teams trouble for them, and was a point of what helped them win last week in Arlington, because they played well last week in Arlington, is they are a weird little pitching staff where they're going to throw at you a big arm like Jacob Frost in relief or Blake Dean in relief. They're also going to start like a guy named Lincoln Sheffield who's going to throw 87 with a big bender curveball, right? And they've got a couple of guys like that. And then they've got Ty Rule, a guy who has a nasty two-seamer. And it's just going to look different than an SEC pitching staff. And so that's not necessarily better than most SEC pitching staffs, but it's certainly going to be a different look. And I think that was some of what teams last week in Arlington ran into with Kansas State, is that, I think about that last game against TCU where Sheffield, they're kind of, I don't want to say junk balling, so that's a derogatory term, but just kind of like their soft tossing lefty just absolutely flummoxed them against a good TCU lineup. And so it's just going to look different than what they'll see in SEC weekends, even if this is a talented team. The other thing is offensively, they lost a lot of firepower. It's going to be more action-oriented. So whether it's LSU or any other team this weekend, they're going to have to – those teams are going to have to control the running game because, D. Kennedy, a Texas transfer, Micah Dean, Shintaro Inoue, those are all guys who can run. So if you let them get on base and you let them hang around, they can make it to where you're going to have a bad time. But that's ultimately how their offense is going to have to win games because they just don't have the pop they had last year.
Unless he's got question marks at catcher, we'll see if Kansas State can make him pay for that a little bit. We'll be watching on D1 Baseball all weekend long. We'll talk to you next week, Joe. Thanks so much.
Thanks, see you, buddy.
Joe Healy, D1Baseball.com's SEC Extra team. Curious to get a little bit deeper into Kansas State. I looked a little bit at the Wildcats earlier today, but I'll write a preview for the entire weekend for LouisianaSports.net coming up on the site first thing tomorrow morning with a 2 o'clock first pitch. And then certainly tomorrow in our first hour, we'll talk about LSU and Kansas State before they first pitch at 2 o'clock. Just full disclosure here, we'll toss all the cards on the table. We had made arrangements for me to be in Frisco, Texas tomorrow and all weekend long. Was going to do the show from the ballpark. Perhaps, definitely read in, go play a little bit of golf at PGA Frisco and see LSU play 3 games. Not a good time for Hunt to be flying the coop at this point from the home base. So we're going to stay home. There may be some activity here in the coming days where we need to head to the hospital. So that's a good thing. We're happy about that, but not going to be able to make it to Frisco this weekend. So maybe another time, as LSU is going to head to Texas a lot in the Jay Johnson area. He likes those. So hopefully a big weekend in the Palmer house, but we'll see. I will not be in Frisco. So the way that impacts you, the listener, I will not be on location tomorrow, and we are not going to shuffle our schedule tomorrow as we were. I was going to go noon to 2 leading up to first pitch like we did on opening day. However, we're just going to go back to our regular Fridays. So OTB will be 7 to 10. Off the bench, live at lunch will be 11 to 1. I'll be 1 to 3, and Matt will be 3 to 6. So standard Friday programming instead of shaking things up for an on-location broadcast from Frisco tomorrow. So go to a break. We'll come back and close out hour number 1.
The Hunt Palmer Show.
Audio Video Security Solutions, avssla.com is that website. Look, if you're not happy with your home entertainment system, you're not alone in that, but you can improve it. And you may not even know how to go about that. But the folks at Audio Video Security Solutions can. It's what they do. Mitchell Fisher and his team are an incredible company based right here in Baton Rouge. Last year, they were the People's Choice Award for the best vendor at the Parade of Homes, meaning they had the best line of products of anyone throughout the houses on the Parade of Homes. They can get you set up with a television mount. They can set up all of your speakers, get the surround sound cranked up. They can do things as high-tech as voice automation. You can walk into the living room and say, watch a movie or watch TV, and the drapes can come down and the television can come on, surround sound can perk up, lights can dim, all that voice automated. They can do things that sophisticated as well. You don't know what's possible until you call them. So go check them out online at avssla.com. You can find them on Instagram at avss_BR. It's Audio Video Security Solutions, avssla.com.
You're listening to The Hunt Palmer Show, brought to you by Rouse's Supermarkets.
Shows always brought to you by Rouse's Markets. Got one more time to tell you about Rouse's Markets and their king cakes, because they're awesome and they're available. If you're headed out to the parade routes this weekend into Fat Tuesday that's coming up next week, and you need a king cake, you can always swing by Rouse's, because they're always going to have them. Rouse's not going to run out of king cakes. They made 600,000 of them for this carnival season. That's enough. They've got, as you walk in, I always go to Burbank and Lee. That's the one closest to the Palmer crib. And you walk in, they're right there in front of you. The plain cinnamon are on the left, the flavored are on the right. Couldn't be easier. They're all marked. Grab one, head right to the cash register if you're headed to the parade route, or you just want one on the kitchen counter because they're awesome. Rouse is always happy to help you out with that in king cake season. Rouse's, this feels like home. I'm going to give my full thoughts on Bo Davis taking the Saints job coming up here at the top of the hour, so 10 minutes from right now. But I do think it's worth just kind of shoehorning into the back end of this hour that there has been one reaction to Bo Davis leaving LSU to go to the Saints, and that's from Lamar Brown. Lamar Brown, of course, top player in the state of Louisiana, offensive lineman / defensive lineman. Not sure where he's going to be, but he's big, he's physical, he's a 5-star, and he sent out a tweet earlier today and said, "My recruitment doesn't change for me. Tigers still #1," with 2 exclamation points and a tiger emoji. So that's a good thing. You understand whenever there's coaching change up, whether it's firings, whether it is guys that are taking on a promotion, whether it is guys who leave for whatever the case may be, that's going to cause roster volatility, whether that's on the current roster or whether that's in the recruiting pipeline. That's natural at every single program around the country. And LSU is going to deal with a little bit of that. There's no question about it. But to see one of the top players in the country who happens to go to school on your campus currently have a reaction like that immediately, unprompted, nobody asked him for that, he just sent out the tweet, is, I think, a good thing. As we mentioned yesterday, LSU's doing a really good job in this class of making sure that it stays together in the state. It's a bumper crop in Louisiana in 2026, and they've got to do everything they can to keep that class within the borders. And you've started out by grabbing 6 of them. Those 6 commitments have got you in the top 3 of the country by on 3 as far as the team ranking goes, and that doesn't even include Lamar Brown, doesn't include Blaine Bradford and some of the other big-time players who are in the state of Louisiana. So to see that, I think, is a positive thing for LSU. It can be a really difficult time right now because you've lost a guy that you think so much of on the defensive front with Bo Davis, but if there's a little bit of solace, you can understand that you've not completely lost your chances with a key player in the state of Louisiana. Remember, like, Elijah Robinson was defensive line coach at Texas A&M a couple of years ago when Jimbo Fisher got fired. He was the interim coach. And there were a lot of guys that were committed in that class just to him. And when Jimbo got fired, they were still there. And then when he took the Syracuse job, they were gone. And LSU cashed in on that with Dominic McKinley and Gabe Relaford. These relationships, I know people don't think of them very often. Everyone just points straight to NIL. That's the biggest deal. That's where kids are going. They're going to the money. Well, sometimes it is the money, and sometimes there is a relationship thing. And so when those get severed, you can have some issues. And we'll see if that or how that happens as LSU moves forward in the post-Bo Davis era. But again, I'm going to talk about all that goes into that and what the genesis of this was and then where LSU goes from here in the top of the second hour, because I think it's a big deal for LSU. And so we'll talk about that in hour number 2. If you missed any of our first hour, always you can catch it on demand wherever you find your sound. You can start at 1045ESPN.com. All of our shows are there every single day. Off the Bench, Live at Lunch, Hunt Palmer Show, as well as AFR. You can catch Musso at the Box there if you're into your podcast. Pelican Scoop is there as well. Hoops with Hunt. All that is at 1045ESPN.com. And it's also wherever you find your sound, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, wherever you get that sound, just search Hunt Palmer Show, like, subscribe, rate, and review all of our LSU football content. And trust me, you're going to want to subscribe to this because LSU football content is coming fast as of next week. Spring football is like 9 days away. We're getting to spring football right now. If you want your spring football fix, and don't want to scroll through everything all the time, just go to Hunt on LSU, and you can get your LSU football content right there all year round. You can get your Saints content at Hunt on Saints as well. All that's in podcast form. And we invite you to head over to LouisianaSports.net as well. We're going to have practice reports up there, going to have player interviews, going to have feature stories as well. Baseball, Saints, Combine, Draft, mock draft, all that is there at LouisianaSports.net, and is all entirely free. So I want you all to go ahead and check all of that out. We got a busy hour number 2 that is coming up. Chris Blair, the voice of the Tigers, with us in 20 minutes. We'll talk a little bit of LSU basketball as they get ready to go to Starkville. Trip to Rupp Arena on deck as well. Saints, what are they looking at defensive line? That's even more relevant now that they've got their defensive line coach. We'll talk a little bit about that. And we'll start off the hour with my thoughts on Bo Davis leaving LSU for the Saints. What does that mean for the Tigers? It's an LSU-centric look at it. That'll be coming up in 5 minutes. So we'll step aside for Sports Center. Hope you come back for hour number 2. Hope your Thursday's going well. Working towards the weekend. It's the Hunt Palmer Show.
The Hunt Palmer Show.